Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brenniger, and welcome to the Eddy Network podcast. My guest today is Jennifer Hunter, who I've just been getting to know over the past month or so, and I'm very impressed with who she is, and in particular, the people that she has surrounded herself with, or they are surrounding her with them, or whichever way it is. She's in a process that I think is really exciting, and hope she'll tell us a little bit about that. But thank you, Jennifer, for coming on and tell us a little bit about what you do, maybe your career path, and what you're interested in now. And then I have a question for you if you do that.
Okay, thanks, Ed. I'm thrilled to be here with you today. So I am the co-founder of an organization called Gensyn Design. And what I do is with my business partner, we design and facilitate collaborative experiences for groups that are coming together to address complex issues. I'll say that just kind of generically. There's lots of different areas that can mean. A lot of people, I think, that are in this work, I don't have a direct career path that led me to this. It was multiple experiences and zigzags that led me here. But I'll point out a couple of things that I think were pivotal in the journey that led me to this point. I have a business undergraduate degree and had a corporate career with a lot of, Fortune 50 companies working in operations and management. But I ended up in higher education after I went to graduate school. I was very interested in organizational development and people development and how people learn, thrive, and grow in their careers. And so I studied human resources and labor relations in my graduate program and ended up then with a career in higher education, primarily focused on teaching in the Department of Organizational Leadership. So there was a significant academic aspect to what I was doing, but I was also took on an administrative role, multiple administrative roles within the university. And one of the key moments that really defined my direction was that I had been long involved in strategic planning. And like many of my peers, loved the planning part, but really struggled on the implementation and had a large scale project that I was overseeing to reallocate resources to help operationalize the most recent 10-year plan. And there was so much learning that occurred. It was so complex. There were so many dynamics involved in the university system and structure, with decision making, with leadership. And the overall process, while I thought as a change leader and someone that felt like I was pretty well versed in how you led these kind of efforts, uh, it did not end the way that I thought it would. And so as a result of that, when I was looking for where was I going to go after that, what was going to be the next assignment I was going to take on, I had the very fortunate opportunity to get a research position with the Department of Systems Engineering at the university. And I had long been a systems thinker, a student of Dr. Peter Senge and the Learning Organization, which I'll be honest, up to that point in time, I had really thought of as somewhat of a mythical structure
Mhm.
because I'd never really seen it implemented or knew how it could be. Yet I was fascinated by the concept and the ideas of it. And so systems thinking, of course, is deeply embedded in that. I knew the issues I had had with my own project were um, deeply affected by some of these systems issues that I wanted to go understand more. So it was there that I think that I began to understand some of what you understand, and I know is in your book about how do you bring that structure and systems thinking and integrate it with the people thinking. And, I brought the people side, they had the process side, and my business partner today actually is one of the engineers that I met there and just was fascinated by what we could do together. Uh, he was doing, systems design. I was embarking on Six Sigma training and getting my black belt, and I called myself a pretengineer. I got to just immerse in that experience, and I loved every minute of it. But I brought that, the people side, the human dynamics, and what began to happen really was so extraordinary with Jason that we would start going into events and co-facilitating those together. And we could see this opportunity to leverage, not only that logical systems design approach to some of the events that we were doing, but structure it and set it up in a way that that emergence could be a part of it, that you could leverage the power of people and conversation in a way that really led to some astounding results. For Jason and I too, on a personal level, we had so much gratification, and I don't want to speak for him. I think he felt that. I certainly did. And I remember the first event we did actually was at the university. We had 60 engineering and technology professors who'd, some of them had been there years and years, that we guided through a workshop related to strategy. And at the end of it, Jason and I turned and looked at each other, and we just knew it was so extraordinary what had emerged, the ideas, the conversations we heard, the opportunities now to really engage those faculty in some of the initiatives that they had come up with, right? Things that they were excited about that would begin to take us in whole new levels. So that really led us on a journey together to explore more around human-centered design, that we did some training at and experimenting both with at the university and then with external organizations. And after a couple of years, we realized we were onto something. And so that's when we formed Gensyn and started off on our own. And there's been no looking back. And I left the university about 2 years ago, and Jason about a year and a half ago. So we've been full time now. And it's just been an extraordinary journey to see the things, the opportunities, the people that we're meeting, and the organizations and groups that we're getting a chance to work with.
This is really fascinating because I've, I feel like I've in a totally different environment have been on a parallel track with you, and trying to figure out where do people fit into these organizational structures. And I've always had this question about systems thinking or systems dynamics or whatever the terminology you want to use, and that they are brilliant mechanisms for identifying the dynamics of an institutional or organizational structure, but they're not so good at identifying where people fit into that. Mm-hmm. I've always wondered about that. And I didn't come out of that world. I've never had a course in systems theory. I've just read stuff, and I've read, done online stuff, and I've just absorbed what I could. And that's my conclusion, that this is still a kind of a mechanistic system that needs to figure out a way to turn itself upside down and inside out, so that people have a place to fit in there, and they become the dynamic of the system itself.
Sure. Systems, the systems I work in are all, I was going to say man-made, I'm going to say human-made. I just saw something in an article I was reading about the 40-hour work week was designed by Henry Ford. And, if you stop and think about that, mm-hmm. We have very much embedded, at least here in the US, a 5-day a week, 8-hour workday that, started about 100 years ago. Henry Ford decided this would be, an efficient way to run the assembly line. And look how that affects our lives in our society. And that's just a constructed idea that all these years ago. And I know that's being addressed in many different ways, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, but so much of the structures and systems we have inside organizations are designed over a period of years to meet some need at the time it begins. And we don't stop and question the way that we're operating in an intentional way. And we just kind of keep putting Band-Aid solutions over things or evolving things incrementally, rather than really stepping back to question how those structures are inhibiting our progress.
So we find ourselves at, I think, a transition point where we now recognize that these structures are a constraint on human ingenuity, human potential. They're obstacles to people working together, of building relationships, of developing relationships of trust and respect and mutuality. So what is it that you see as a way of addressing that need of making sort of these human-made systems much more human in function?
That's a big question that you just asked. And I think there's probably multiple ways to get at it. And it all starts with the people, not to be cliche about it. But, our approach and the way that Jason and our other colleagues and partners that we're working with would be to address it through design. You have to design for the circumstances you want.
Mhm.
And that means starting with a lot of discovery, a lot of sense making, a lot of sharing, which is built on the foundation of relationships. And there is no transformational change that can happen without relationships as the foundation and bedrock of that change. And so it's about strategic conversations. How do you bring groups of people in around a question that looks at some either specific challenge or transformation that you want to happen? How do you guide those kind of strategic conversations? And then importantly, actually make change, take action together collaboratively. One of the things that I'm very involved in is a practice called strategic doing. And it is a practice designed specifically for some of that reason. The idea that we are shifting from a world of hierarchies to a world of networks where collaboration across organizations and communities is required to deal with the complexity and the challenges that we have in our societies and communities. And so strategic doing is an approach to bringing groups together that are networked groups to very quickly form collaborations that are based on trust and relationship and that help them take action that lead to meaningful outcomes. It's based on taking sort of rapid cycle experimentation in the terms of projects as the building blocks that we would work in short term. The focus is on learning by doing, doing the doable, but all of that is based on building a culture of trust and respect. And in fact, that's the very first rule of 10 rules or skills that we have embedded in the practice, which is, ensuring that we are creating the space that will allow for trust and respect, because we know that to get the results that we want, that foundation must exist before anything else.
Obviously, the question that follows is, how do you do this?
Mm.
So how do
Well,
you do this? I mean,
so
let me add some dimension to that. I mean,
sure.
I'm thinking, say, for example, of a company with 1,500, 2,000 workers, and you've got a C-suite of maybe 10 senior vice presidents, and they each have their own uh, assistant. So I'm thinking, how do you take the assistants and build that kind of communication between them?
This is an area that right now we're in the middle of exploring. Strategic doing has been used most significantly in community and networks
Hmm.
areas. So there are inherent challenges to using a practice like this, which is exactly what your question is. How in a hierarchical structure do you come in and put a practice in that can work horizontally across the organization, right? Where you don't have one person in charge. It's built into the practice that I can't tell you what to do, you can't tell me what to do. Emergence is built into the process. You're really looking at, this is about agile strategy, really, where you're seeing that strategy is a process. It's not about building a long 10-year plan. It's about recognizing that we are in this midst of complex change that's happening all around us. And we have no idea how we could design a strategy or a strategic plan for 10 years out. But what can we frame right now around a challenge that we want to develop strategy for that we can work together collectively to address? And so we always start with framing the challenge in an appreciative question, right? So we take it from a challenge to an opportunity, and it invites conversation just by reframing it. Imagine if we did this, imagine that our organization could work horizontally and achieve great things? What would that look like? And you have the people design that, right?
Right.
And that's what inside these organizations, when you think of the locked potential and value that people have because they live in the world of constraints, right? They have a job title, they have a position that they're in with objectives that are aligned to their performance improvement plan or their annual review. They're in a department with, departmental boundaries or divisional boundaries. There are power structures that diminish the opportunity for people to get outside of the box that they're in. I understand the need for bureaucracy and structure. I think that there's a good conversation to have around why you need that structure and rules. But what we've got to find and design for is this organization of the future that flattens those hierarchies, that creates space for people to truly explore their own potential and meaning, while also achieving the goals and the needs of the organization. And I think this is one of our great challenges right now, is to go out and find organizations that are willing to experiment and look at how does this work? How would this work here? Because it's not a cookie cutter approach for sure, but it's got to start with the people, and the people in the organization are the ones that need to design it.
So who is the person within an organization that you're looking for to be the instigator of something like this?
Mm.
Who's that? What does that person look like?
Well, I think one of the places we can start is in the middle,
Mm.
because oftentimes what we find is the best way we can't convince people of this. We need to have them experience it. And
Mhm.
if we can start in the middle, which is I think where so many of the challenges are with these frontline leaders, that they're on the ground, they're working between the strategy and the C-suite and the direction coming from the top, trying to support their teams and the people within all the constraints that they're feeling as middle managers. They're the ones I think that's where we start. And it doesn't matter where you start. I think you start with these methods and approaches with a small team and showing what's possible.
Mhm.
And that will quickly multiply into more as people can see what happens. I know for sure when you care about people to the point of wanting to ensure that every person's voice matters and is heard, every person has the opportunity to contribute to problem solving strategy, to thinking about these challenges or the design of the future. When you can leverage that expertise and ideas that people have, you engage them in ways that most of them have never been engaged. When people get engaged, they get highly motivated to take action. They get highly committed to the groups and the organizations and the ideas that they've been a part of coming up with.
Mhm.
And that's where real possibility exists in my experience, is that you get people thinking and acting that way and taking on this mindset of possibility, things can transform very rapidly. And that's how I see this spreading in an organization.
And I would suggest that one of the constraints is that fear of taking the initiative to even have a conversation with you or Jason, and that there is this emotion of hopefulness that invades the individual. Oh, this sounds really hopeful. Oh no, I can't think about that. Because this is just too. It's not possible here. Oh no, we've tried all these things. It's not possible. But and yet, it's that's where it begins. Is that sense of, oh, this sounds hopeful. So where do we go?
And
So.
that we have to focus on learning by doing. And so if you start small, and these when we think about strategic doing specifically, we use projects as building blocks really to gain momentum and trust. And so you're right, depending on the organization and the experience people individually have had as well as collectively, they may be a little bit reluctant to go all in, right? They're not going to bring all their cards to the table. They may give a little bit or, go through the motions. When you start to have this experience though, and you come together and you see, okay, I was able to share, I saw things come up from the conversations. We've actually done something from that conversation. It didn't go into the black hole of great ideas. Um, then you say, okay, let's go back and now, based on what we've learned, let's frame another challenge or build on the challenge we started with. Imagine that, whatever it is, and you go into another round and you start these cycles of learning and doing, experimenting, right?
Right.
And what happens is momentum builds, the trust builds, the relationships certainly begin to build. And so when we think of networks, what happens is people start hearing about what's going on. We want to create a buzz around this, right? And share what we're doing. And so as that momentum and buzz grows, more people want to get involved, right? And so the network grows. And we've been involved in multiple initiatives like this in the community level where, we may start with one team, 7 to 9 people. We don't want any more of that than that on a team. But as the group grows, and then you have 2 teams, then you get 3 because people start coming and wanting to be a part of it. In an organization, I think to one of the first questions you asked, how do you do this in an organization? Those are the things that we need to design for and explore more, but have the people, I think, starting from the middle. If we can get one team ready to go, I think from there you could build it out across the organization.
Is there a generational component to this where certain generations are going to be more interested in this than others?
The easy answer is yes. I think the easy
What does that look like? I guess is the
yeah, I think
I would think that if we take the 4 or 5 generations that are kind of currently in the workforce now, whatever that is, each one of us looks at things differently, and so this appeals to us, each one of us differently, and
that's right.
that's what I'm that those generational distinctions is, I guess, is what I'm asking, and how they become an asset for what you're doing.
Yes. No, I think it's a great question. And you know, I'm going to say, I'm going to compare generations to mindsets, right? It's those mindsets associated with the experiences they've had. And so if we think about those that have very much experience in a command and control organization, and that's why this gets tricky if you have that kind of mindset where, especially if that's why I say let's not start up at the top necessarily. If that senior leadership, who they're used to making decisions, they're used to creating that strategy and pushing it down in an organization, right? And
Right.
it's critical that we have that kind of thinking, that kind of strategic thinking. But what we can find is that we can push this down into at the team level to have strategic thinking and cross those generational boundaries. Now we're creating the whole experience for everybody. And so I think it's going to be people's previous experiences are going to affect how willingly they come into this new way of working. But the more they do it, I think they'll quickly adapt. And I think it's because it hits people on an individual level. It's about the group and the relationships,
Yeah.
but we're all human. And I think it's innate to all of us to find meaning and purpose. And I think there's a bit of needing to explore your own potential that this hits on.
Yeah.
And I think if you are involved in an activity, or, we think of them as workshops or sessions or experiences that we bring. And I'm, as the facilitator, setting up the dynamics where I know I'm going to hear every voice, and that might be because I have Post-it notes and pens, right? And I'm asking you to write your ideas here. Or it might be that we're using technology that you can anonymously share your ideas or answers to a question we might be asking. That's going to tap into every generation, every person. And what we really hope by doing that is that because we think all those perspectives are needed. There's so much wisdom embedded, certainly from people that are in older generations than me. I love learning from the wisdom they have from all the experiences they've had. But I also absolutely love teaching college students. I learned so much from them in my classes. I love working. I have a young woman I'm working with right now who is a former student that's now out working in a corporation. And right at this moment, she's one of my biggest teachers. And it's just because of her mindset and perspective that is just different than mine. She's had a much different experience. And I will tell you, she is much more open to possibility and excited about the future and all the things that could happen. And that is inspiring to me to know that we could tap into that and actually we can bring generations together to kind of surface the best parts of all of them.
I see how this is an ideal approach to revolutionizing businesses, organizations. But I'm curious as to how you see this functioning in other social environments, like a community or a school or in a family or a marriage. I see these are also similar organizational structures, which
Mhm.
with similar constraints on how they communicate and how they the two spouses have their own mindset as this is my job, this is her job or his job, and so they get locked into this perception that becomes very hardened. Same with their children, same with their neighbors, same with the people at the club. I mean, how does this get applied in those environments, which then become a petri dish for invading back into businesses?
Sure. I think a collective intelligence emerges when you bring people together. And if you have a structure and process to engage them in a strategic conversation, whatever it is, you can tap into a shared wisdom, create a shared wisdom based on all of those unique perspectives. And, when we think about our communities and our societies and the significant divisions that currently exist, the challenges that we have right now, it's the only way I can imagine forward
Mm-hmm.
is to create these kind of opportunities for people.
Yeah.
We've been very fortunate in our community to work on things related to early learning and childcare, education,
Mm-hmm.
K through 12, along with early learning. We right now are involved in working with a network. It's the Infant Mortality Community Action Network.
Wow.
I can't imagine something heavier to bring people around to start thinking about. But our state has some of the highest infant mortality rates in the country. And we have an amazing group of people with so much knowledge, whether they're practitioners, they're healthcare, they're educators, they're social service agencies. It's very difficult to truly collaborate. And when I say collaborate, what I really mean is co-create. That's a very complex process when you think about decision making, when you talk about taking action, when you talk about how do you manage that kind of work from a network perspective that you want to leverage the expertise across all those different types of people. And that's really the kind of structure or designing that we're bringing in, that we can help those groups, as I've already mentioned, go through a process starting with building the respect, the trust, the civility needed inside those conversations, framed around an appreciative question, and then defining these short-term projects that we can learn by doing and build momentum. And we've applied this, and there are people all over the world applying strategic doing in similar ways. This is just what we've done here. And it's extraordinary to see what happens. And so in terms of long-term change, the Child Care Coalition that we've worked with, that is both at a regional level as well as county levels, they're collaborating together, working on projects, ultimately looking for policy change, because much of what needs to happen is at that level. And one voice, one individual, one agency struggles to do that. But when you build a network of people that are coming together across all of those different perspectives, agencies, professions, et cetera, to address a complex issue like childcare or infant mortality, you can begin to have influence at the State House, right? To be
Mhm.
able to begin talking to legislators, start advocating for changes, being able to surface the collective intelligence that emerges as part of the process.
Yeah. Oh my. I mean, I really love this because, so many of these programs are dependent upon identifying a particular archetype, and they're the person that you go to and you identify that, and that person becomes the driver of this. But it
Sure.
sounds like this is not that. This is different. This is this is the group driving it themselves, and you've given them an experience of what that looks like, and therefore you have given them the experience which they can draw upon to to build something which they never knew existed and will transform everything that they do.
It
And
could,
yeah.
it could. And, I think about it as, you're shifting power away from a few
Mhm.
to the people, right? I mean, that's to your point. We often have key decision makers or influencers, right? And who is that usually in our communities? You know, it's a few elected officials, which in the case of many places, including my own, are typically of a certain gender and race and age, quite honestly. They don't reflect our entire communities, yet
Right.
they're making decisions that are affecting all of us without the true input or perspective of of the communities that they're elected to represent. And I think that if we and we have to continue to work on that. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. We need to continue to work on our civic society and getting people to vote and getting elected officials that will work and rely on this collective intelligence around them. But we also need to create those methods to surface that, and get people engaged and wanting to do that. And one way, as I've said, that we can do that at the community level is around these appreciative questions, building networks to come in with people. And these, I mean, they're amazing people that have been working years in these fields.
Yeah.
They, it's so humbling to go into these meetings and have these conversations and hear just the journeys of these professionals, the things that they've been involved in. Their hearts just fill the room because they are so deeply committed to making a difference. And, you know, whether it's children, babies, families, they want to make a difference in the community. And so it's been humbling for us to be a part of a process that can just help guide a conversation, right? With these simple rules and structures that we can guide a conversation and just help them move through that into these outcomes that they're achieving. And it's an extraordinary privilege, I think, that we are feeling. And in terms of going from the constraints of our former, careers into this space of seeing nothing but possibility, and now knowing that we're connecting with other like-minded people around the world, quite honestly, that is elevating, I think, the space where we're realizing we could work in terms of huge transformation, right? What are some of those truly significant challenges that we could perhaps be a part of?
Well, obviously, the way to increase this is to do more strategic doing. Obviously, but it sounds like there's there's a network effect that will come from this, where people who have learned this method have experienced it, have mastered it, begin to do their own consulting or use this as their own strategic tools for implementing change in other settings of their life, and that's where the real network effect begins to take hold.
That is 100%. And, Jason and I we're probably not very smart consultants, if you will, because we usually, early on in conversations with potential clients or new clients, we don't want long-term clients. That's not our goal. Our goal is to come in and help you build your capacity, right? We want you to be able to do this. And we think of it as we're building an engine of capability. And that, if that doesn't sound like an engineer, I don't know what does. But, it's that idea that we can come in with these, we have a mindset. That's ultimately what we are offering. And we have lots of different, methods, tools, approaches, strategic doing being one of them, particularly for the challenges I've mentioned specifically, but lots of other approaches that we can take. The idea, though, is that we come into these groups, whether it's a team, a network, an organization, and we want to help build that capability for them to do this work, right? And they don't need someone coming from outside to help guide it. So there's lots of opportunity for learning, development, doing training on some of these specific skills, but it's building that confidence and ability of the organization or group to take this on.
So next to last question. So obviously this is a process. This is a program or a process very similar to the stuff that I do with Circle of Impact. You begin with values and purpose, and you build relationships, and you decide together what your vision for impact is, and then you decide what kind of structure do we need. Yes. That's that model. So the question I have for you and Jason is, so what is the structure of this business that you two have look like 5 years down the road? How do you take this idea and apply it to your own business structure?
So we live in the world of emergence ourselves. And I think that in terms of where we could be in 5 years, Jason and I are business partners. It's the two of us in Gensyn Design, but what along with others, in particular, I'll name John Morley, who's a strategic partner and collaborator of ours, that has built such an amazing network of people. And we together are, I think I would say we're building a collective. We see an opportunity with amazing people around the world that share a mindset, right? We have, I would say, complementary approaches or skills or ideas about the way that we see the world or the opportunity in front of us and the need for transformational change on so many levels. But what Jason and I are very clear about when we think about our business and scaling it is we're not looking to hire or bring people on to teach them what we do, because we already do what we do. We're looking for people that can come in and multiply what we do. Mm-hmm. We're looking for multipliers. And so when we think about this collective, it's where do we share this mindset and we can come out together and ourselves create a new organizational structure that gives the autonomy, freedom, and opportunity for people to let their own souls expand and reach their own potential, right? And we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. I think that that's what we're exploring, is how do you create that where this collective can be people from all over that are coming in and out as the need and the opportunity exists. And we can come and work together in all kinds of different spaces.
I'm really glad that you said what you said, because that's what I see you all doing. I mean, the few conversations I've had with you and Jason and John, that's what I see you all doing. And I see, and this is why it is exciting to me, because what you are doing, you call it a collective, I call it a network. But the network is a collection of nodes, locally based, where the action is being taken by the nodes, but the knowledge is in the network itself. It's the collective knowledge that you all share with one another, and your relationships with one another allow yourself to grow, and that collective knowledge to be shared And there's probably certain limitations on network size, but that's okay because and there's probably, if it's a real network, there are parts of it that are there for a while and then they go away, and new nodes form and then nodes break off. I mean, that's the way these networks work. But I see that this is not just a great idea, strategic doing and all of that. That's a fantastic idea. It's very innovative. It's really a future. But I think the way you all are operating, the way I see you trying to form this thing, is also an innovative organizational structure that I have been looking to identify in the real world for a very long time. I mean, that's why I talk about the difference between institutions and networks of relationships. And so it's very exciting to me to see what you all are doing.
Thank you, Ed. I think there's no better time to explore this and put it into practice. And we will learn by doing it ourselves in ways that I hope will help us help other institutions consider the opportunity to rethink the way that they're operating as well.
And you don't have to preserve any legacy institutional structures, because that's the way we've always done it.
That's right.
That's death. That's death. Well, this is really exciting. So how do if people want to somehow engage with you in some manner, have a conversation or hire you or whatever it may be, how do they find you?
Sure. Well, they can certainly find us on LinkedIn, personally, Jennifer Hunter. They can also go to our website, which is gensyndesign.com. Gensyn is spelled Gensyn, design.com. And our phone numbers and email addresses are there. And yeah, we would welcome people to reach out. We love just to have strategic conversations, emergent conversations. I've started calling them Gensyn Jam sessions. And there's nothing that we love more than just meeting new people and exploring different ideas and thoughts and learning from people that are interested in the future of organizations like we are.
Well, as this develops and you have success stories, I want to hear success stories. We'll have you and Jason back on together, and I want to hear, and John too. I want to hear success stories, because those become the cultural history that other people refer to. Oh, well, they did this, and that's what happened. And I think would love to hear those sort of things as we continue on talking with one another.
Good. We'd love it. Thank you, Ed. We would love to come back, and hopefully here in the next few months, we'll have a clear idea of what some of those opportunities look like. So we'll definitely stay in touch.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jen, for being here today and all that you're doing. And thank you, everybody, for watching. And I hope this has sparked something within you that says, I want to be different, and I want my company to be different. I want my community to be different. And now I have a sense of how that can happen. And if that's so, then I encourage you to be in touch with Jennifer or leave a comment here on the website, on the podcast, so that we know what you're thinking. So we'll see you next time here on the Eddy Network podcast. And thank you for watching, and see you soon, Jennifer. Bye-bye.
Thanks.